I think Wizards of the Coast has gone too far. Well, the balance team at least. I think we're leaving behind the modern format, and I have a fear that it's too late or it's getting there, that it might reach the levels of another format that's managed to bounce itself back, but is also dealing with some current issues as well. I wanted to paint the picture to you today, show you some numbers, do what I've done before when I've talked about, bans and all that stuff, and really nail into all of your heads as to why we have a real problem right now and how it's very similar to a pattern we saw 3 years ago. Now, let's start things off with the tweet that really sparked this idea, and I think a lot of people are talking about in general. One from Doomwake talking about no changes to the modern format, where we got a product announcement instead of a banning, or a change to any format, an update. We got preordained recently, but we couldn't even change anything else with a format where modern challenges are okay with 6 out of the top 8 of the challenge having Rakdos Scam. What about the next one, just the day before, where 1, 2, 3, 4, half of the challenge of top 8 is scam? Or the next one where about a third or whatever is as well. Scam is everywhere. Rakdos mid-range has taken over the modern metagame, and a lot of folks have gone to the route of just dealing with it. It's okay, you can play something else. You can play Burn, which has recently been winning some modern challenges. You can play anything that has to do with Modern Horizons 2 at this point. Stuff it into your deck and you'll be fine. Throw some beanstalks in there for good measure, or play Cascade. But it doesn't do enough, because when you get scammed out of your games, it's very hard to come back from them. Even the Cascade decks, honestly, they have a good matchup, because ultimately you just need to top deck the combo. The deck can't interact with you, or Scam can't interact with you in the way that they want you to, unless they have something like Douthie Voidwalker, in which case, honestly, the deck has everything. They have the Blood Moons, they have the Graveyard Hate, they have the mid-range threats, and they have you early. The deck does everything. So why won't Wizards help us stop it? We're not going to get it in terms of card sets anytime soon, so we got to look at the numbers. Take a look at the November 3rd Modern Challenge. If I just reduce my camera here all the way down to the corner, 40% of the Modern Challenge top 32 was Rakdos Scam. 40%. November 4th, 35%, 34% was Rakdos Scam. And then the same, another one on the 4th, almost 30%, 28% of the metagame is scam. And then finally on the 5th, just yesterday, 37.5%, almost 40% of the top 32 winners metagame is Rakdos Scam. Forget the rest of the modern metagame. The decks that are winning are scam. And I think that's where the problem lies. People are all stuck in their ways about, I can play anything in modern and really succeed. I mean, if we take a look back at these challenges that I'm pointing out to, take a look at it. Boros Burn won one of the challenges on Saturday, and then even on Friday won the challenge. Sure. But is Burn represented anywhere else in this metagame? No, not really. Not to any reasonable amount. It's just Scam. And then Cascade decks, and then any mid-range deck that can hope to survive. Look at the numbers on the sheet that I made. So I took the top 8s of those challenges themselves, right? So cherry-picked information, very small sample size, but it's highlighting a recency point where out of the 4 top 8s of this past weekend's challenges, highlighting the scams, 43%, 44%, almost 50% of the top 8s of the last weekend's challenges are all Rakdos Scam, and yet Wizards wants to talk to us about saving limited or whatever, which is relevant. I'll give it to you. Limited is important for the health and the prosperity of the game, for players as well. I get it, but modern deserves better. Let me highlight it to you in a different way. Let's take a look at numbers from the last year. So this is the MTG Goldfish metagame for the last year, 365 days. We have Rakdos mid-range at almost 10%, similar to Murktide. Murktide was the rule of the roost for the longest time, and heck, even now with Preordain, it's even up there as well. But Rakdos midrange is still the second most represented in the last year of decks. Let's look at 90 days. Rakdos Scam and Rakdos midrange. What's the difference? I couldn't tell you. This is the same deck functionally. Then go to 30 days. 21% of the metagame, almost more than 3 times the next represented deck, not even double, 3 times Rakdos Scam at 28%, 3 times more than that, almost 4 times the next represented deck. And then finally, if you go to 7 days, the past week, the most represented deck is Rakdos Scam at 29%, almost 30%, almost a third of your games in the winners section of these challenges will be Rakdos Scam, representing 4 times the next represented strategy. We are facing a numbers problem, and that is where I want to talk about my fear, my biggest problem with how I think these bans are being managed and where I think the modern format is going. Talking about a deck that we saw from 3 years ago take over a format that really excited people, saw its big downfall, and is now seeing a comeback, especially due to its comeback and implementation into the MTG Arena clients. Talking about Pioneer and how it almost died to the sins of Inverter, a deck that, according to Wizards, for the longest time was not seeing the league or play representation that they thought would warrant a change. Inverter of Truth was probably one of the most busted decks in the Pioneer metagame of all time. I mean, there probably were more busted decks because honestly, the whole format saw bannings like month after month. It was implemented really well at the start, but then Inverter of Truth was allowed to go on for too long. Inverter plus Thassa's. The interaction was too powerful. You couldn't really tap out against this deck, which means you had to play suboptimally, even though your opponent was doing exactly what they wanted to do almost at every step of the way. I mean, look at this with Inverter. On June 1st, 2020 of that year, there was no change or mention of the Pioneer format, no change to Inverter whatsoever. June 1st, 3 years ago, Wizards completely avoiding the problem. And then just that same month, at the end of the month, on June 28, 2020, we saw, well, this is a repeat of the screen for some reason, we saw a Reddit post come up talk about how the Pioneer challenge did not fire. Why do you think that is? Do you think people want to play a repetitive metagame all the time? And now, of course, I will say that the number of players playing Modern right now is likely more than the number of players playing Pioneer. So I think the challenges will still fire regardless. But due to rising costs in playing the top decks like 4-color Beanstalk, 4-color Omnath, Rakdos Scam, your Mana Traders accounts can't get to those amounts. You have to earn or own a certain amount of those cards to even play these top decks. So how are you supposed to, I guess, compete at this level? You just play casually, I guess. You can't be at the top of the winners metagame at any point. And deep in RCQ season right now, that's not the greatest thing in the world. You take your Modern deck that you spend so long training and working towards, ultimately realizing that, hey, you probably have a suboptimal scam matchup, or even if you do have a good scam matchup, you probably have a bad matchup against most of everything else. So it's just pain and suffering playing to the numbers. It's a bleak outlook. And I don't want Modern to get to the point where, if Modern gets to the point where the Modern challenges aren't firing, especially now that we have 4 a weekend, the format is popping. But it's definitely going to see a downhill turn if 2 months later, that Wizards finally, in that year of 2020, August 3rd, finally addressed Inverter of Truth. They also addressed Kethis, the Hidden Hand, which was actually a come up combo deck, which I'm also kind of upset about. They never really let this combo deck go. But then we saw the banning of Walking Ballista and Underworld Breach as well. So they kept it consistent. It wasn't just Inverter. They stopped other combo decks as well, which was good. This was a good change. Then also at the time, I mean, look at the other things. Wilderness Wreck, Growth Spiral, Teferi. This was a crazy time for Magic right before the pandemic started. But they made that change. And what I'm asking now is for Wizards to make that change as well. Ban something out of Rakdos. Let it be Fury, in my opinion, and then also ban Renin 6 so the 4-color decks don't take over, and then ban something else, even the status quo. Do not wait until Modern Horizons 3 for that set to fix the Modern format. It's time to take action now. And really the next thing that we can look for is around the corner again, but I doubt many changes will happen because we thought changes would happen at the last BNR. Are things perfectly balanced according to Wizards? Or is it worth no changes whatsoever? Are we too late and Thanos has found all the Infinity Stones, so we lose 50% of the format and its players? Well, according to this, according to an announcement they recently had, and Robert Taylor, at Fire Shoes on Twitter, talking about and posting an image about, in addition to the yearly announcement, we will also have a banned and restricted update on the third Monday after every set release, specifically dedicated to addressing large environmental imbalances. These will, by large, happen after the Pro Tour. Now, this is an important caveat because although the third Monday is coming up, it's December 4th. We have a month away before any of this can even be thought about, because it has to happen after the release of Ixalan. Right after that is RCQ Barcelona, as you know, shown by a tweet later down here in this comment thread. So will they actually make that big change before a big modern RCQ? I don't think so. And I think we're in for the long haul of Scam, which is why I made changes on this channel. I don't play a lot of mill anymore because I find it very difficult to do in a format full of Scam. I think it's still possible. There's still a lot of talented mill players out there, but I find myself gravitating towards other formats or other decks, but still playing the modern format. I recognize that there are ways to beat Scam. I will ultimately address that. I will understand that this deck is taking over the modern metagame because it is the most optimal deck to play, but decks like Scales, heck, decks like Rhinos still technically have a positive win rate against Scam due to various reasons. So there are ways to address it, but then you also have to be able to afford those decks, know how to play those decks, and be able to play those decks well to a competent level at these top levels. It's very hard for the average player to do, let alone myself, who has a bit more time than I guess the average player, to learn these new decks and adapt to the Scam metagame. And I think that's my ultimate fear. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Am I going too far? Am I being too, I guess, just too much in my head about Scam? Is the Scam problem okay? Is 30% of the metagame, almost 40% of winners metagames, okay for a deck to rule? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below. I have my feelings about it. I don't want this modern format to become what Pioneer was 3 years ago. And I don't think it'll approach, I don't think it'll hit that anywhere near it. But I think even if it approaches it, we still have a problem. Let me know what you think.